My name is Bo. I am the farmer of Yonder Farm. I grew up on a farm. My parents' farm is right across the road here. And so I remember, driving in the tractor with my dad, irrigating and swimming in the ditches and the water. During my childhood, sort of growing up in Weld County and growing up in the 90s, I wanted to get away from the farm. I had my eyes set on anywhere outside of Colorado. I skipped town, moved to New England, and then lived in South America for some time, lived in San Francisco for some time. Eventually, as I approached 30, I decided that I wanted to be closer to family and made my way back to Colorado, not necessarily back to the family farm though. There was a point when I was working my 9-to-5 job in technology that I got a bit burnt out and I quit my job. I applied to several different places and I ended up taking a job as a farmhand at a farm in Boulder called Cure Organic Farm, led by Ann Cure. That experience gave me a 180-degree different perspective on farming. It was small scale, it was organic, led by a woman, lots of queer folk who work there. And I was learning all of these different practices, and it was so inspiring that it provided me enough fuel to actually move back to the family farm. Farmers have different motivations for why they farm. There are a handful of motivations for me. One is the aesthetics, right? I'm in flowers. I like visual design. I like design in general. I always look for any native varieties that would do well. And so growing echinacea and yarrow and common sunflower, they grow well because they're native to here and they make a good cut flower. So when I think about the goals I had in mind when I started this venture, there wasn't a single goal that talked about money. I'm not doing this to make money. If you're a farmer attempting to get rich, best of luck to you. A lot of farming is experimentation. You only get so many summers to grow stuff. And when you think about over the course of a lifetime, I'm getting started at 33, 34. And if I do this until I retire, that might be 30 summers that I have to play with. One motivation I had in starting this farm was, in a sense, to be the version of farmer that if I had seen as a child would have benefited me. In choosing the name, I like the phrase out yonder. For the folks who know, the out might be a little bit more meaningful to them. I want to be out at the farm and creating this to be a creative, welcoming space for whoever. So in terms of this plot, I'm trying to sort of intentionally design it. Over here in this sort of grassy area, I want to eventually put like a stage and create a space for live music, poetry, things like that. And so while the audience is looking at the stage, they'll be able to look out here and see all these lovely flowers. So obviously we live in the system of capitalism, and when we live in a system that prioritizes profit over anything, you get these larger, commercial farms where it's a lot of monoculture, growing one species of something, growing a lot of it, tilling up the land at the end of the season and redoing it all again, having to purchase and buy chemicals and fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides to make that one crop yield the most as possible. I cannot completely remove myself from that system, and I know that. I'm a bit in this position, very grateful and privileged so, to experiment with how I can push back against the capitalist system, and not everything I do is going to yield the most profit. As a result of sort of de-emphasizing how to get a yield, how to sell the most blooms, I find myself more interested in the craft of being a farmer and developing relationships with these plants for the long term for many of these perennials, and knowing that if I plant asparagus, I'm not going to have anything to sell for 3 years until it yields spears. For some of these perennials, having to wait a year. For many of the shrubs that I'd love to use in some arrangements, having to wait some years. And while it's just sort of sitting there and not yielding a profit, it's developing the soil, enriching the soil, and the horizon that I look at is not just produce as much stuff this year so I can sell the most stuff. It's how do I design a livelihood that is rooted in something deeper, more meaningful. And as a result of that, I think the desire to create beauty comes right with that. And one economic model that pushes up against capitalism a bit is the community-supported agriculture, also known as CSA, where people in the springtime, up front, pay for an entire season's worth of produce or flowers or whatnot, not knowing if that crop is going to get hailed out, not knowing if pests are going to come in and do damage to that crop. But they are up front saying, hey, farmer, I see the value in the work that you do, and I want to commit up front. Please take this money and use it to get your operations going, and I will be the beneficiary of whatever you have in your harvest. So the CSA model is quite in contrast to sort of a pure capitalist perspective where it's let me get whatever I want, whenever I want, delivered to my door and not even know where it comes from. They've lost the human element, the person who grew that food or product. And so the CSA model is a bit in contradiction to that, where people upfront pay without getting a product then, and may have to wait months or weeks down the line to get their first product. As a result, the connection between the public and the farmer strengthens. The public and consumers are reminded about the process and care that must go in to create these products. By putting your dollars to smaller scale operations, you are also pushing back in a way against the larger economic system. Again, I don't have all the answers, but I'm certainly attempting to experiment with different models and different ways of having a livelihood where meaning, connection, and beauty are at the forefront.